You guys asked for it, so we're delivering. We're gonna go through the entire process of talking to a self-storage seller from the beginning of a cold call to getting the financials, to underwriting the deal, to negotiating with the seller, and hopefully locking it up. So to make sure you don't miss out on any of this high quality content for your information, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any of these important videos of the process from A to Z. So we got this lead from cold calling. Our cold caller sent the lead over to our acquisition team. My acquisition guy took the call, spoke with the seller, and was able to gather the financials. That's their goal for us, is for them to gather the financials, for me to take a look at and underwrite the deal and see how we can present an offer to the seller. So as part of this series, we're gonna include the call from our acquisition agent talking to the seller, how he had the initial conversation to get those financials. So make sure you look in the description for that link to that call. It is part of this series. So on this call, he gathered the information that we look for, which is a unit mix, which states all the types, unit types of the property, whether it's he has 10 5x5s, 10 20x20s, 20 20x20s, whatever it may be. He got us an occupancy report, which shows the occupancy per month. We got a management summary about the property and also a P&L. So a profit and loss statement, also called an income statement, showing all the income for each month and the expenses for each month, which tells us the net operating income. We base our offer based on a net operating income that the property produces for the year. So we're gonna dive into these numbers on our underwriting, and then we're gonna show you exactly how we come up with our offer. If you've never seen a profit and loss statement, we actually made a video breaking down a profit and loss statement and showing you how to look at it and what allows you to pinpoint what is the add value you can bring to a facility by going through the profit and loss statement. So if you want to check out that video, right here. So from the information we collected from the seller, we're going to put this into our underwriting sheet here. Essentially what we're doing is we're filling out our income and expenses. So based on the unit mix we received from the seller, we have this right here showing exactly how many 10x5s, 8x10s, 10x10s he has, and what he's getting for on the pricing. So this is at takeover. So this first section is at takeover. That's us taking over the property. And year one is what we think we can get after takeover. So how I figured that out, I called the facilities around and also looked online and found out what they're charging. And so on this one, he told us that he was pretty much the lower, but pretty competitive, which is very accurate, because a lot of times on these, I can only really increase it maybe $5. It wasn't really a lot of added value on this. He's pretty on par with the market. So also when I call these facilities, I just don't ask for the rates. I try to get an idea of how much inventory they have available. They have vacant. So that's the way we determine the supply and demand in the area. If I call a facility and they have 10 10x20s available and 10 10x10s available, then it's less likely that I can increase the pricing to their numbers if they're sitting empty. The way we find out how much occupancy they have or how much vacancy they have, we present ourselves as a big owner of a commercial property or something. So sometimes I say I own a furniture company, or I own a staging company, and I say I have to like store 10,000 square feet worth of stuff while my commercial building is being built. It's not ready yet, and I need some space for 3 to 6 months. So by stating it in that term, they're more likely to give me more information. If I just call and say, how many 5x5s you have and how much do they cost, how many 20x20s you have and what do they cost, they're not really likely to share that information. So sometimes even these places have online their inventory, how many they have left also. So we check online and we call around all the sites around our facility within a 3 to 5 mile radius. So we inputted everything that we pulled up from the unit mix and filled this out. So this is the total rent, the total number of units, and then the total income if it was fully occupied. And then this is what it would be after rent increases, after year one, after we take over, what it could be. So not a huge increase. It's like $1,000 more a month. So it's not drastic. Right now, his vacancy is 12%. So he's 88% occupied. We have underwritten it at 15% vacancy. We're increasing the vacancy because that was the standard previous to COVID and previous to these record all-time high occupancies. So we're being conservative with our numbers, and we put a 15% vacancy factor for this deal. So this, including the vacancy factor, this will be our gross income each month. So we're slightly higher, even though we have higher vacancy, because of that rent increase. So now we're going to go into the expenses categories. So this is the operating expenses each and every month. And this is what the seller provided to us. So he's got repairs, his taxes, his property insurance, utilities, what he pays for phone, internet, landscaping, credit card processing. This is the one thing I've left out in the past, is not including credit card processing. With using automation, trying to get everybody set up on auto pay, you're going to typically pay 2.5%, 2.75%, 3% in processing fees for whoever is on auto pay or using credit cards. So his supplies for the year, expenses, other expenses, his payroll. So he kind of runs the facility like we run it, very, using automation. Has a one person goes to, as boots on the ground, goes to the facility, overwalks units, cleans out units, make sure everything's good at the property, makes an appointment if needed. And so he's more running it as like a unmanned facility, more boots on the ground, someone who just kind of maintains and helps with the property. That's the same way we run our facilities. $200 for advertising and promotion. So the next year, we're looking at year one, we're including some things. So we included a property management fee, which is almost like 5%, repairs and maintenance, real estate taxes. Repairs and maintenance, we kept the same. It's a very clean property. He just did a lot of work to the property. Real estate taxes, there is going to be typically an increase in taxes. So like in Florida, typically at sale, they reassess the property and they increase your property taxes. In the state that this facility is in, they do it a little bit differently. So I called, found out exactly how they're going to reassess it, and increased it by the projected reassessment rate. For insurance, I increased it a very little. For utilities, I increased it about 5%. Cable and internet left the same. Landscaping left the same. Credit card processing, I increased it based on the increase in the rental income. Office supplies kept it pretty the same. Other expenses the same. Payroll the same. Hopefully I can keep that same guy. And also advertising and promotion, I kept the same as well. Again, this is just for us a rough estimate for our initial offer going into the property, and just kind of getting a base idea of like where it's at when we buy it at today's numbers and where we can take it to at year one. So as we scroll down, his current monthly expenses are 29% or 23%. And then for me, I have it at 29%. So my expense is going to increase. In Florida, my property is typically in Florida, we're actually running at like 37, 38% expense ratio. And due to we have higher property taxes and we have higher insurance rates. So those two factors drastically increase your expenses. The top three expenses for a self-storage facility are property taxes, insurance, and payroll. This property produces a net operating income each year of $183,000. So actually, because obviously I increased the expenses, my net operating income is actually going to go down after I buy it. And that may be true, may not be true, but that's how pretty conservative with our numbers. So we want to make sure that we under promise and over deliver. As we go to the next section, this is going to be determining what we're paying for the property and what the seller's asking. So from my acquisition agent talking with the seller, he was asking for $4 million. So he has a price here of $4 million. So with this seller asking for $4 million, that would make it a 4.58 cap based on the net operating income of $183,000. If we were to buy it for a 6 cap, that'd be just over $3 million. So for us, the only way we can make a 4.5 cap deal work is if we get great terms. And so that's why we're making a creative offer, trying to get great terms with the seller, so it actually does make sense for us to buy this property. So I've ran the numbers on a scrap piece of paper here, and now put it here into this spreadsheet. And I have determined that these are the kind of numbers that work for us, that could work for us. Hopefully they work for the seller. $600,000 down, so 15% down at a 40-year mortgage and at 2% interest. This acquisition and loan cost, so there's $100K. There's not a lot of work that needs to be done to this property. Very low for repairs and maintenance, but we are going to have closing costs. We want to charge an acquisition fee, so that way we can make some money up front at the sale, and then also some reserves. And there's probably going to be a little bit of work needed. Looks very clean, but there's always something that can be done. So at 2% interest, and my all-in investment into this deal, or if I raise private money, would be $700,000 that I need to raise. So the payments each and every month are $10,296.07. This is how much goes towards interest, and this is how much goes towards principal. So that makes our annual debt service this $123,552. So our monthly cash flow on this property is just under $5,000 and just under $60,000 for the year. Our cash on cash return is 8.53. If I was to personally put in 700 grand to this property, I would make an 8.53% cash on cash return at takeover on this property. Essentially, based on our underwriting and increasing some of the expenses, increasing the vacancy rate, it actually drops my cash on cash return to 6.74. And the reason being is there's not really any other add value. It's a very stable deal. It's a good brand property. There's not a lot else I can do to the property. We can increase the rents a little bit, but that's pretty much it. There's no expansion opportunity. It's ran well. His expenses are low. Us buying the property, we're probably going to have more expenses than what he has. So this property makes sense if you have a desire to make a 6.74% return on your money, because also you get the principal pay down that each year you're paying down $56,000 towards principal. You get the tax benefits of depreciation. If you bought this property for $4 million, you would get $800,000 in depreciation if you are a real estate professional. And so that will be a great tax savings for you. This is one of the reasons why we're actually looking at this deal ourselves, is because we just sold some self-storage facilities. And so buying something like this where the cash on cash return isn't that great for us, it could still make sense because we're going to save a lot on taxes because we did not do a 1031 exchange when we sold the property. So we're going to pitch this offer to the seller. Let me backtrack real quick. So actually, a lot of times you raise money for these types of deals. So if you have cheap money, if you have money that you can borrow at, say, 3%, then you're paying $21,000 a year for this 700 grand to borrow. Maybe you give them some equity, maybe you don't, and you can borrow that money at 700 grand, pay $21,000. $21,000 minus this 47 net is $26,000 that you would net. Now, if you pay 5% on this 700 grand to your private investor, private lender, and maybe you give them equity, you'd pay $35,000 a year, and you would personally net $12,000. And that's what we do. We raise money from private individuals. We give them a return on their investment, and we could say, hey, we give them a preferred payment, meaning they get paid first before anything else. So we could say, hey, lend me 700 grand. They put up all the capital, and we're going to give them a 5% preferred interest payment for putting up that 700 grand. And they get, say, 30% of the deal. So they would get this first 35,000, then the rest of the cash flow to be split would be 12,000 to 11. And if they're getting 30% of that, they would get an additional $3,663. And then we would get the other 70%, $8,548 a year as our cash flow for the year on this property. And you would split the depreciation. It's all a negotiation with your lender. You can split the depreciation equal ways. You can give all of the depreciation to your investor if that's what they need. Maybe you're just getting started. You don't need, 800 grand in depreciation, but maybe your investor does. And maybe that's why they will give you, a 5% pref return, or consider a 5% pref return, or maybe even less, because you're giving up all the depreciation. So there's a lot of ways you can structure this. But right now, for us, we typically look for at least an 8% cash on cash return. We typically look for add value opportunities where at year one, we can get it to like 14, 15, 16% cash on cash return. So this is a deal that's more of a stabilized deal because there's not so much add value, more of a turnkey property. So something like this for me is not really ideal. It could make sense for me because there's not so much capital that needs to be raised. And I also can purchase this myself and not have to pay a large tax bill at the end of 2023. So for me personally, I'm going to first look to see if I can wholesale this to another investor, maybe somebody who has 1031 money or has a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines and wants to park it in a safe asset as a hedge against inflation. So those are a couple of things I look at. It does look like still a good deal for somebody with this type of return on a safe asset in a good area. And so that's our underwriting for this section. So make sure you subscribe because this is part of a series, and we're going to go over every single process of negotiating a self-storage deal. So make sure you stay tuned, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.